It's been an absolute pleasure to deliver the Wayfinder program in partnership with the James Hutton Institute and James Hutton Scientific Services. And the program was funded through the Scottish Government, through the Ecosystem Fund. And part of the responsibility of delivering that program is to share our learnings and insights and recommendations with the broader ecosystem. And so to do that, Rachel and I are just going to kind of talk through our top 10 key takeaways, insights, recommendations from delivering the program. Rachel, why don't you share your first key takeaway?
It was really clear that there's vast commercial potential inside universities and research institutes. So many brilliant ideas and, have such great potential for societal and economic value. But ideas that stay in somebody's imagination or locked in their mind really don't meet that potential. So a way that we can, help researchers to bring those out and define them, starts that process of creating value. That was really obvious. How about your first insight?
Yeah, and so it links directly to that. One of the key barriers to releasing that opportunity and that potential is mindset and identity. Skills, yes, they're important, right? But actually, one of the most kind of fundamental barriers is the academic or researcher's mindset or identity. Do they think of themselves as someone who can commercialize the research? Do they think of themselves as someone who can be entrepreneurial? And to release that and to change that, that's probably the more challenging thing to do, but it's also the more impactful thing to do. So it's really thinking about how we can get to get people to start to see themselves as people who do commercialize, people who do translate that research into real world impact, because that really starts to generate a lot of momentum. Okay, what's your next key insight, Rachel?
It builds on that, how people see themselves. So introducing the concept of commercialization at an early stage can really transform how researchers feel about their academic identity and how commercialization aligns to that. And quite often that starts to bring in roots to impact. So why do you do what you do? People love talking about that. Quite often it hasn't been framed in that way. Who needs what you do? Why would they pay for it? That starts to get into a really interesting conversation, but that all helps people to see themselves or start to change their identity. So starting early to get that commercialization process and idea into practice. What's your next key takeaway?
Okay, so the key insight here is that there's loads of opportunity, loads of potential, and actually people who want to engage, but there is not a good, scalable, structured process at the front end to translate those seed ideas into genuine commercial opportunities. It's done in an ad hoc way. Some people will come forward, a whole bunch of people won't. It's sporadic, it's on and off. And what we really need, and I think was demonstrated through this program, is when we have a structured, disciplined process at the front end to translate kind of seed ideas into well-defined commercial opportunities, there is loads there. What is our scalable process at the front end to translate those initial ideas into something that we can work on? Because there is loads of opportunity, but we do not currently have a strong, structured process at the front end. Okay, Rachel, what's your next one?
So building on yours there about using structured tools, how do we use structured tools to turn complex research ideas into clearly articulated and accessible narratives? That was really a key part of Wayfinder, was teaching researchers how to talk about their research in a completely different way. Quite often they didn't have the story, they didn't have the language pieces to build that story. And so using a structured process, we helped them to do that. And not only that, we embedded over a longer time reps and getting confident and building momentum about talking about their research in a completely different way, which was quite alien at the start, but certainly at the Innovation Summit, they were really, really good at it. And it gave them a real boost in confidence. What's your next key takeaway?
It links directly to your point there. It's about how do we build confidence. So key point here is if we need to build confidence, the method by which we build confidence is not through a one-off workshop. That just doesn't work. What it is over a longer period of time, structured practice, cycles of learning, scaffolding, support to do that. So this program, the participants went on a 6-month journey, right? And it was cycles of learning and practice and practice and practice and practice. And through that, they developed the confidence. Had it been one workshop, it would not have achieved the objective. And so we need to really be thinking about mechanisms for how do you effectively build confidence. That takes time, that takes reps, that takes cycles of learning, but that's the only way we can do it. It's not a one-off event. Okay, what's next for you, Rachel?
An appeal to say you really need capacity to be able to focus on innovation and commercialization. So a researcher needs that capacity to explore. They're not sitting with that capacity just, in their day, that there's not 20% capacity waiting to be spent. So how can we keep momentum when they're expected to do this in their marginal time? What's your next takeaway?
It really links to your last one there. It's like the importance of visible leadership endorsement of commercialization. So, what are they saying when they support it? What are their actions doing? How are they making it clear to the organization, to the people around them, that this is an important thing to engage in? And we saw this with the leadership at JHI and JHL, that, their support, which they gave great support, really helped to get more people interested and get more people involved. And so we need this, one, to get people to engage, but also there are some systems challenges in terms of freeing up capacity that really only leadership can tackle, right? So we need them to be actively engaged, actively bought in, willing to make those systems changes to create that time and space for people to engage in commercialization. We need leadership to lead on commercialization. Okay, what's your last one?
My last one changes direction a little bit. One of the key takeaways from Wayfinder was what happens when you match a researcher with a commercial champion early in the process. So we recognized that there wasn't going to be enough time to teach the researchers everything they needed to know from a commercial perspective. So what would it look like if we brought somebody in to work with them? One of the key barriers in climate tech and agri-tech is there's not that recycling of commercial champions who have very specific experience. The ecosystem needs to nurture the few that they have. But what we showed was anybody with commercial experience, willing to give some time, could really move the researchers forward at a much faster pace. So really thinking about how we can do that as the ecosystem. And what's your final takeaway, Zach?
Yeah, again, it's building on your last point. It's really about, how do we build these connections, these strategic connections? Because in many ways, the challenge here is how do you connect the right people at the right time, right, to move that forward. So once we've defined that opportunity, how do you get the right people connected? And that really is about building a vibrant ecosystem. And we saw that through the Innovation Summit event, that was effective at bringing together, those people. But what we need is we need to move beyond one-off events, and we need to have sustainable, ongoing mechanisms that build those connections. And yes, there's value in kind of broadly bringing a bunch of people together, but there are also specific connections that we need to be able to make. For example, the connections between the venture, the founder, and the investor. The connections between, to your point, the venture, the founder, and a potential commercial co-founder. So it's good to build that ecosystem as a whole, but we also need to create those mechanisms to build those connections between the very specific people that are needed at that specific time. And so, how do we build those mechanisms in a sustainable way?
Fantastic. Thanks, Zach. I think, just that whistle-stop tour of those 10 key takeaways will hopefully be helpful to the ecosystem. I mean, we learned so much over the time we worked together with the partners.
I just want to add a final thank you to the participants, the partners, the funders, to everyone who helped really make this happen and make this such a huge success. We had a blast delivering it. We learned loads, and we really hope this is just the start of something much bigger for the region, for climate tech, agri-tech, and to really help build a increasingly vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Scotland.